Have you ever tried to point out to your partner that they had done something wrong, and within a few seconds of speaking to them, they put the blame right back on you? Have you also noticed that this is a pattern in your relationship? Then you're welcome because you are in good company. I've experienced the exact same thing. And in my case, I remember trying my hardest to explain. I thought that the more I tried to explain and make my partner see reason, they'll realize that what they were blaming me for was absolutely not my fault. Unfortunately, it didn't work. I could never get them to see that what they were blaming me for was not my fault. And if you're watching this video, you're probably experiencing the same thing. Let's talk today about how you can tell that your partner's blame game is actually a sign of emotional abuse. Blaming someone else or blaming something else when we have done something wrong or made a mistake is something that you have probably done at one point or the other. It's a defense mechanism that sometimes we use when we are afraid or when we've been cornered. But blaming can actually get to a point where it becomes emotional abuse. So, how can you tell that your partner's blame game or your partner's blaming has become emotional abuse? The first thing that you will notice is that the blaming is constant. That means they are blaming you over and over and over again, and they are blaming you all the time. They are blaming you for things that are their fault. They're blaming you for things that you have no control over. They're blaming you for the most ridiculous things. In fact, it can get so bad that you can't go a day with them without getting blamed for something. Now, let me think of a couple of examples of things they could blame you for. So, let's assume that they are driving and you're sitting right beside them and they're talking to you. Then they make a mistake and they miss a turn. They're going to blame it on you. They're going to say, oh, it's because you were distracting me. That's why I missed the turn. And if you make the mistake of pointing out to them that they were the ones talking to you, then they're going to go on a whole roll and start talking about how what they were saying was important, how you could not wait, that's why they had to say it at that time. And then they begin to whine and say how you are at fault, you are going to make them late for wherever it is they are going, you're going to cost them another 15 minutes because now they are going to have to run around to find the turning point, etc. Now let me think of another example. Yes. So let's say they forgot to pay the bill and now you've been disconnected. They are going to blame you. They're going to say it's your fault that we got disconnected because you didn't remind them. And so if you say something like, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Ha! Then they're going to get upset. What do you mean you forgot? How can you forget? Blah, 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 blah. And then you now say, oh, but you also forgot. Then they're going to tell you about how, don't you know I'm such a busy person? I have a busy schedule. Why didn't you set a reminder? Why didn't they set a reminder? Whatever. But it's just going to end up being your fault. Sometimes blaming can go from very ridiculous things to very serious things. And there are times when, I've heard cases of a partner blaming the other for not having kids. So they will say things like, it's your fault that we don't have kids. It's because you've done this or you've done that, or there's something wrong with you. That's why we don't have kids. I've actually even heard of a story of a man who blamed his wife because their child had a disability. So blaming can become a torture. It can begin to affect your mental health when it becomes too much, when it gets to a point where you begin to feel guilty, you begin to feel like you are incapable, you begin to feel your self-esteem becomes battered because your partner is constantly blaming you. Another way that you can tell that your partner's blame is actually emotional abuse is that they never, read my lips, never accept responsibility when they've done something wrong. And so, because of this, you are unable to resolve conflicts with them. In fact, trying to solve an issue or resolve a conflict with them is like going on a hamster's wheel and going round and round and round in circles until you get to the point of absolute exhaustion. Trust me, I know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you're watching this, you probably understand what I mean as well. Because they're never going to accept that they've done something wrong. They're never going to accept that the reason why things are going wrong in your relationship is because of them. They're going to make sure that the blame is put on you. In fact, I've heard ridiculous things like a partner telling, their spouse, I cheated on you because you let yourself go. For someone to have the boldness to blame somebody because they decided to stay, it's just ridiculous. But this is something that an abusive person will do. They will do everything that they can to deflect the blame from themselves. They will simply never take responsibility. And so if in your relationship you are always finding it difficult to resolve your issues or to resolve your conflicts, please know that you are probably dealing with an abusive person and you are being emotionally abused, because they will always deflect. In fact, sometimes they'll start talking about something else. So you say, oh, you forgot to pick up the groceries or something. Then they begin to tell you about how 2 weeks ago you also forgot, and how they didn't make so much of an issue of it, and they don't understand why you are making an issue of it. Or sometimes they'll just change the topic completely, and then you begin to argue over something that is not relevant at all to what you're talking about. It's normal with abusers because they will simply never accept responsibility when they're wrong. Now, the third way I think is probably the surest way to know that your partner's blaming is actually emotional abuse. It's when the blaming is accompanied by yelling, accompanied by threats, accompanied by an attack on your person, accompanied by shaming and ridiculing. So they don't only blame you, they start to yell. So you want to discuss something important, and they, turn it on your head, put the blame on you, and then they start to yell and shout you down so that you cannot explain yourself, so that you cannot defend yourself, against whatever it is they are blaming you for. Or they begin to throw threats at you. They begin to say, in fact, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I actually did a video where I spoke about yelling, how you can tell that yelling has become emotional abuse, because yelling is actually a form of emotional abuse. I'm going to link that video up here. I don't know if it's my left or my right now, but it's going to pop up on your screen somewhere. And I also did a video about threats, about how threats is actually a major sign of emotional abuse. I'm also going to link that video up somewhere so that you can watch it after you've seen this one. So yeah, when your partner is not just blaming you, but they do it by attacking your personality. So, you were supposed to do something, or they were supposed to do something. So you ask them to pick something up for you on their way home, or something up for you to drop it somewhere, whatever, and they didn't do it. Then they begin to tell you how, no, you didn't remind me at the right time, or you didn't, your instructions were not clear, even though when you were trying to explain to them, they were like, I'm not dumb, I understand. And then when they make a mistake, then they say, oh, you didn't explain it well enough, oh, you were not clear enough, da da da. And it then goes from just blaming you to them yelling, or to them threatening you, or to them saying you can't even do anything right. All you had to do was just explain what I needed to get, but you can't even do that right because you can't do anything right. And then they begin to attack your person and shame you. Please know that then they have become emotionally abusive. So the blaming is absolutely emotional abuse. Let me do a quick recap. Number one, the blaming is constant. Number two, they never take take responsibility for their actions. And number three, they accompany their blaming with yelling, threatening, shaming, attacking your personality, etc. Please know that you are dealing with an abusive person and you're in an emotionally abusive relationship. So, how then do you handle your partner's blame game? This is what I'll tell you, and it's my honest from the heart advice. Don't engage. Don't bother. Don't try to explain yourself. Don't try to argue. Nothing. Just disconnect. As soon as they start their blaming, if you can, walk away. Unfortunately, walking away might not always work, because there are people who get aggravated when you walk away. So if you can't walk away, just keep quiet, because you are not going to win. It's just going to keep getting worse. They are not going to stop. They are going to make sure that you are exhausted. Okay, so handling blame is simply don't engage with them. Don't even bother. Once you point out they've done something wrong, and then they want to start going on their, round tripping of blaming, just disconnect, because that's the only way you can handle it. And if you can, please leave the relationship, because look, you're going to get frustrated. And the problem with getting blamed all the time is that you can get to a point where you genuinely begin to feel that you are at fault for the things they are blaming you for. It's almost like brainwashing, when someone continues to tell you over and over that you are the cause of all the problems, that everything is going wrong because of you, that you are the one making the relationship not work. It can get to a time where you actually begin to believe them, and you begin to believe that you're not good enough for them, which is actually not true. They're the ones that are not good enough for you. So blaming can really, really take a toll on you if you continue to stay and put up with it. So start thinking of getting away from that person. Now, blaming is not the only sign that you're being emotionally abused. That is why you want to hit the subscribe button so that you can know other signs of emotional abuse. And please don't forget to like this video if it was helpful. Please, please, please give it a like. It will really encourage me. In fact, to give me a big smile when I see your thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye bye.